This is a really good but also like really hard question. So I'm gonna try my best to like share what has worked for students that I've worked with so far. So the main thing you have to understand with this is that let's say you're trying to jump from like 125 to 127. That's gonna be a lot more questions that you have to get right. Let's say like, for example, like 8. I don't know these numbers off the top of my head, but this is what I noticed when I was doing practice exams, like personally and with other people. It's a lot more questions that you have to get right compared to like going from 128 or 129 to 130 plus. So that could be the difference between just like a few questions. So the margin of error is like way smaller when you're trying to jump from like 128, 129 to 130 plus versus like trying to break through like the 125 mark or the 127 mark. So if your margin of error is like a lot smaller, meaning you have to get way less questions wrong when you're trying to make that jump, like you can't miss like maybe like 2 questions or 3 questions, then that means that you have to be really diligent about trying to figure out what you're doing wrong. I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself because that's what I usually say for like, hey, how do I improve in cars? But it really does help. So what that looks like is go through your full lengths as much as you can and try to figure out like if the mistakes that you've made across like let's say 2 or 3 full lengths are the same kinds of mistakes. Because I did this with students, they'd be like a month out from their exam and we would go through like multiple full lengths and we realized like, oh, these are the same kind of mistakes. Like maybe they're getting tripped up on the wording, or they're still having a hard time understanding like certain parts of the passage, or maybe they're struggling, when they're under pressure to like pull information from the passage. So reviewing like multiple full lengths and trying to compare why you got certain questions wrong, I think is really helpful, because at this point when you're trying to break past like 128 and 129, you're just plugging in smaller holes that are there. From there, if you've figured out like what mistakes are going on, then you really just want to like practice the steps that you want to apply to fix it in an untimed condition, and then kind of like integrate it into timing slowly. So ideally you should get the steps down untimed, and then once you start to like see that mistake go away with untimed practice, you can throw it in like a time setting. But I think there's like a big caveat to have with this. The caveat being that like it really depends on your ability to like identify those mistakes that repeat across different full lengths. And if you as an individual are having a hard time doing it, it's really helpful to have a friend go through it with you, like someone else who's also studying. Because I've noticed that when students like go through like passages and stuff with another student, maybe they got number 1 wrong, but like this student got number 3 wrong, and they can kind of figure out from each other like, oh, this is why I got it right, and maybe this is why you got it wrong. And if you do that with a friend, it like really helps, because you just need another person who's looking at it from an outside perspective to tell you what you might be doing wrong. I mentioned the friend thing because I know that finding a tutor is like not accessible to everyone, so that's a good place to start, is having a study buddy. If you don't already have one, there's a lot of like really good Facebook groups that are out there. I forgot the guy's name, but that Dr. Gray guy who like posts stuff on YouTube about the application cycle has a really nice Facebook group that people are very supportive of. And have someone look over your exam. If you're by yourself and you feel confident that you can identify the mistakes, then that works too. But big key is reduce your margin of error by figuring out what exact mistakes you're making. And you can do that by comparing your full lengths. You can also compare your question packs to see kind of what's going on there.